On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we look at some top headlines, including a new partnership between AT&T and Intel, and speak with Argyle Data to discuss how mobile operators are using big data and machine learning technologies for real-time fraud detection, prevention, and profit. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. On this week's show, we have an interview with Argyle Data to discuss how mobile operators are using big data and machine learning technologies for real-time fraud detection, prevention, and profit. But first, let's take a look at some top headlines from across the space. Well, AT&T this week announced plans to partner with Intel to work on the telecom giant's cloud network initiatives. The partnership calls for work on optimizing NFV packet processing efficiency for AT&T's integrated cloud platform, defining reference architecture, and aligning NFV roadmaps in a move to speed AT&T's ongoing network transformation. AT&T has said its integrated cloud platform is where the carrier runs VNFs using OpenStack software at its core, with the carrier having set up 74 AIC physical locations in 2015, with plans for 105 by the end of this year and adding hundreds more by 2020. As part of the new deal, AT&T said it will join Intel's Super 7 program of web and cloud companies working on network and data design centers. That program currently includes Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon.com, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. AT&T and Intel had previously announced partnerships on 5G and drone technologies. Also this week, a report from IHS Markit found Cisco, Nokia, and Ciena viewed as the top SDN vendors among global service providers surveyed. The survey, which included carriers that have deployed or plan to deploy SDN and NFV platforms, cited Cisco and its TeleF division, Ciena and its Cyan division, and Nokia as having the greatest brand awareness in terms of SDN orchestration software. Cisco and TeleF and Nokia were also noted as top providers in SDN hardware and software under evaluation. IHS found more than 40% of those surveyed plan to buy equipment from specialized SDN vendors, open source distribution vendors, data center virtualization and orchestration software vendors, and virtual network function software specialists. Criteria cited in selecting vendors included product reliability, service and support, technology innovation, price to performance ratio, and management software. Well, for our featured interview this week, we spoke with Parag Stapleton, who's the VP of Engineering at Argyle Data, to discuss how mobile carriers are using big data and machine learning technologies like Hadoop for real-time fraud detection, prevention, and profit. Let's take a look at the interview now. Well, thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. And this week, we're joined by Parag Stapleton, who's the VP of Engineering at Argyle Data, to talk a bit about the company and also some issues when it comes to the telecom market in terms of fraud and different issues that kind of pop up in the telecom space. So Parag, thanks so much for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Great. Glad to be here, Dan. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Very good, very good. Well, let me start off with, for those that don't know much about Argyle Data, maybe a little background on the company, kind of how you guys got started, what your focus is.
Okay, so Argyle Data really came together back in 2013, and our initial focus and our focus as a company and as a product initially was in the telecom fraud space. So fraud in telecom is a big problem. It's a 38 billion plus a year loss to the industry, which amounts to between 1% and 2% on an annual basis. And those numbers vary a little bit, but I think that probably the most reputable source is the CFCA, which is an industry body, which puts that number between 38 billion and 40 plus billion, depending on the year that's in it. So when we stepped back and we looked at that, we believed that there was an opportunity for a company to come in and look at tackling that fraud in a new way. And historically, there have been a lot of solutions out there that have looked at processing transaction logs in the telco space, looking at CDRs, looking at other types of data, but was not doing it real time, was typically doing it in batch mode and maybe getting results 12, 24 hours or even more later. And that's a long time for a fraudster to actually leverage, we'll say, gaps in the carrier's network and actually harvest a lot of revenue from it. So we thought that a better approach to this was to look at how could you reduce the time from fraud occurring to detection, and how could you actually look at a lot more data in order to actually have a better holistic view of what was happening in the network. So our approach was to look at some of the work that was done by people like in Google and Facebook, particularly Facebook and their immune system, where they have to look at fraud and those types of issues on a constant basis that's attacking their network.
Mm-hmm.
How could you bring some of those concepts to the telco world and allow you to basically detect fraud in real time and allow a carrier to react quicker and save money? One of our marketing folks here has this catchline that minutes means millions. And that truly is the case for a big industry like telco. The longer it takes to detect fraud, the more their money they're losing as a business, as a company, etc. So our approach in Argyle, based on our founders, we had expertise in telco, folks with expertise in machine learning, folks with expertise in database technology. We came together as a group, and we decided the best way to approach this was if you could combine big data, from which is being evangelized by companies here in Silicon Valley, layer on top of that machine learning, because the other thing as well you got to think about the amount of data that's coming into these companies now. The volume is just growing exponentially every year, and just relying on an analyst to be able to look at that data manually and try and pull out the needle in the haystack, which is fraud by nature, is just not a reasonable expectation anymore. So you got to apply technology to it. And our view was you should be able to apply machine learning techniques to be able to detect fraud in the telco space. So combining big data, machine learning, and basically then bringing that together and creating a data lake within the carrier. And we say data lake. What we actually are working on carriers is bringing in data from different parts of the business. Mm-hmm. Another reason why fraud, I think, has been allowed to go on for longer is data in carriers tended to be a little bit siloed. So, data in the billing system would only go into systems that the billing people would look at. In the network side would also tend to live within that part of the business alone. So by actually bringing them all together, you actually have a far better view of what's happening within your network. You have a 360 view of what subscribers are doing, how they're using their network properly in most cases, or fraudulently in 1 or 2%. And that's the 1 or 2% that we're looking to catch with our solution for the telco space.
Makes sense. And obviously, like you said, it is a big data world out there, and it seems to be getting bigger by the day. I know operators, like you said, are under a deluge of information coming into their networks. If you look back over the past 10 years, that increase has just been amazing how much more they've got coming in. And you're right, the fraud aspect is one of those things that seems to be, it's not that they don't want to talk about it, but it's something, it does seem like it's hard to get a handle on it because again, there are so many new streams coming into their network and so much more connectivity on the network. So there's so many more opportunities for fraud, it seems like, out there.
That's true. I mean, one of the really classic things about the telco space is that it's one of the few industries that really has big data.
Yeah.
Think about all the different types of services that they supply to their customer base today, and the amount of equipment that they've deployed within their networks to actually allow them to do it. All those nodes, all those switches, all those routers, all those cell stations, backend, they're all generating logs. Basically, the smoke, the exhaust fumes from their business.
Yeah.
Historically, those exhaust fumes were being kind of pushed out to the side and were being aged off these databases within 30, 60 days, etc. But with big data, there was a lot of really useful information coming out of those services, out of those servers. So what we're doing is we're harnessing that output, and we're bringing it into our data lake and into the fraud solution, and actually allowing us to basically capture fraud quicker, detect it, and alert them as a result.
Got it. Now, it does seem like that the technology behind a lot of this has really evolved a lot over the past few years as well. And it seems like, maybe companies were thinking about doing something like this maybe 5-10 years ago, but the technology really wasn't there to support it. I guess, can you talk a bit about the importance of maybe the evolution of technology in terms of, obviously, like you said, machine learning and Hadoop out there, and different ways to kind of look at big data streams and kind of, understand what's happening out there. How important has that been to your own development there?
I think it's been very important, right? I think we would be the first to say that if we tried to launch this product 5 years ago, it would not have been possible. But in the advent of all the innovation that's happened here in big data and Hadoop over the last 2 to 3 years, we're able to leverage a lot of the different components that have been put together. So some of our stack is made up of pieces of the usual stuff for ingestion of large data sets into Hadoop, using stuff like Flume, Kafka, etc. We also use key value stores with indexes. And that's really important in the telco space because the volume of data that's coming in, you need to be able to index that in a way that you can search and you can actually provide results on it in real time to an operator or an analyst who's using that data. So we leverage that type of technology. We also leverage technology called Presto, which is a distributed SQL engine that was developed in-house by Facebook and was open source. And it's a really powerful engine for actually allowing you to query large data sets and get back very small, relevant results in real time. So it is, as you said, it's the fact that this technology has come available over the last 2 years, allows you to create these large data lakes, ingest that data into it, normalize it, and then be able to query it and run it through machine learning algorithms. and be able to do something useful with it. I think that's one of the key things for us in Argyle Data. When we started out 2 years ago, there was a lot of companies that were focused on tools and enabling of the big data space. But what we wanted to do was actually create an application that had a real ROI for our consumers using Hadoop, using machine learning. And it's one of the unique characteristics of Argyle Data today is that what we did, we built an application, soups to nuts, on top of Hadoop, which is basically leveraging Hadoop technology, machine learning on top of that, and all running natively within Hadoop for our customers. And it's quite a unique proposition in the fraud space.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too, because I've been covering this space for a few years now, and Hadoop has gotten a lot of attention, but it did seem like that there was, kind of this initial rise around the excitement around Hadoop, what it could do. But when it came to the telecom space, there wasn't a lot of execution on that. I mean, there are things you could do with it, but whether it was the vendor community or the carriers maybe being a little averse to it, didn't seem like it took off really rapidly, at least in the telecom side of things. But it does seem like now, again, like what you guys are doing, it's starting to gain some traction. Obviously, carriers are a little more comfortable with it probably at this point too. So it seems like a little more comfort level, a little more adoption out there, it seems.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, so we work closely with the large Hadoop distribution vendors, and we're partnering with them in some cases. And when we go out today, I would say 90 to 95% of all carriers we're talking to here in the US, in Europe, Latin America, they're all starting to kick the tires with big data. So what I think you'll find out there today is that most of them have gone and they've made the initial investment of purchasing a bunch of servers, and they've installed maybe it's their Cloudera, their Hortonworks, or their Map, or whichever flavor they decide to go with. And now they're starting to dabble with, hey, how do we start getting data into these data lakes? And then next question is, how do we start to drive value out of them? So I think, like with everything with carriers, right? It's an industry that moves at a particular pace. So they are not going to be the fastest industry to go from 0 to 60 from the point of view of getting a Hadoop big data application running. But they're very cautious in how they proceed. But the one thing about it is they do see it everywhere you talk now. Every one of them is looking at how do I start to leverage Hadoop, big data, and a lot more now, I think, machine learning as well. They're starting to appreciate the value of that. But they are looking at how we can leverage this and how we need to integrate it into our business going forward, because they understand as well that, and they've seen other companies in other parts of the business, how they've leveraged big data and process and actually doing interesting things with data to drive their business and drive new revenue streams. And they're starting to realize that they're sitting on a gold mine. Yeah. The question is, how do they mine it?
Yeah, and obviously, you talk about that real-time aspect, because that is a very important part of kind of like really getting the value out of big data. Is the quicker or the closer you can get to that real-time metric, the more important it's going to be. But it does seem like that again, operators have a history of, like you said, kind of being somewhat conservative. So them being able to trust vendors to come into their network and really, because what you guys are doing is really getting to the core of their network. I mean, you're seeing a lot of what's coming across there, and so there has to be, I'm guessing, a certain comfort level with that as well to make sure that they're allowing you in there to kind of, put your equipment in there.
Absolutely. So our equipment we deploy it on premise. So what we're doing is we're putting our equipment into their data centers. And so obviously, once you're behind the firewalls within their data centers, there's a lot more of
that's sacred ground
information floating around those networks. A lot of PI type information, and they are rightfully so extremely cautious and sensitive to any type of application that gets deployed there. And again, it's interesting because Hadoop, I would say 2 or 3 years ago, probably was not quite ready to deploy within that type of environment, But the whole ecosystem over the last few years, work stuff like integration of Kerberos, encryption of data in rest and in motion, and other type of modules that have been built and deployed by folks like Cloudera and Hortonworks on top of the basic Apache Hadoop, I think have allowed carriers to feel a lot more comfortable about deploying these types of solutions within their networks, and therefore having the ability to, be pretty confident that the data will be encrypted and that access to those servers and those clusters will be restricted as per their internal policies. So I think it's that maturation within the Hadoop system has allowed them to deploy it. And then once it's in, obviously then the next challenge to overcome is getting the data feeds from the different parts of the companies, getting them into the clusters that the carriers have built. And once you start to do that, particularly around networks, transactions, location information, etc., then you start to be able to build applications that in real time can help carriers understand what their customers are doing, and either through applications like fraud and security, build those applications based on that data, or more from a marketing perspective. Now that I have a better sense of what people are doing, where they're doing it, I can start to create some marketing opportunities based upon this data.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you, I guess, how comfortable are operators at this point with allowing these platforms to kind of really have a full view of what's going on behind the, like you said, behind the firewall? I mean, is it just kind of a carrier by carrier basis, really, or does it seem like in general the industry is kind of taking those steps at least to allowing like you said, some people behind the firewall that are really kind of see what's happening and really get the best value out of this?
Yeah, it is on a case-by-case basis. Some carriers, I think, are being very aggressive because they see the fact that we have a lot of really useful data here, and that if we can bring it together and build applications to mine that, apply machine learning either to looking at stuff like churn or how to reduce costs within the business, etc., they can actually help their margins. But I think what we see is that carriers who have a little bit more mature processes in place around security and ensuring that the data will be safe when they bring it to these platforms are the ones that are moving faster. The ones that are, I think, are still kicking the tires are those that are, we need to make sure we don't have the same level of maturity around process, same level of comfort around that this new ecosystem, big data, will actually protect our data similar to what we may have had in the past in the legacy. But I don't think that's only a matter of time. Everywhere we go, people are saying we either have it figured out or we're going to figure it out, and this is the path we're taking. And all the carriers, they all have initiatives underway pretty much with moving to big data and how to leverage that going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm guessing then from your point of view, at least the technology that's behind what you guys are doing is mature enough, I don't want to use the word carrier grade enough, but up to the standards that operators tend to have in terms of what they're looking to bring to the market. That you think so far you're kind of to that point at this point?
It is for the most part, right? But I will say there's always a piece of it's never enough for carriers. Carriers are a very demanding customer, and but the great thing about it, right, is once you gain their trust, they're also a great customer to have. It's a high bar, but it's a bar worth overcoming once you get there. So we've found in the space around security that I think most of the tools are there, but we've had to supplement it with some proprietary applications and proprietary, in-house developed capabilities. And it's that layered on top of what the big data ecosystem is providing is what allows carriers to be comfortable with what we're doing. So I would say, obviously from our perspective, the more that we can take from the ecosystem, the better we are, and we focus on the value-added application. But if it's not there, we will go out and create it. A great example of that was that we wanted to use Presto to leverage the key value store and be able to have that distributed SQL engine across the servers. There was not a really good ability to connect Presto to the key value store we're using. So we went and wrote our own. We basically created those connectors between the two pieces of technology. We made sure they were secure and encrypted, and it allowed us to leverage Presto across that key value database and be able to do that, provide that functionality to our customers. Again, it wasn't in the ecosystem, but we built it on top of it.
Interesting. I guess how well is the ecosystem, not just developing, but all the members of the ecosystem? How well are they all playing together? Because we always hear about, in the vendor community, obviously, everybody needs to work, if they're working around like an open standard type of thing, that people need to kind of contribute there and be kind of somewhat open to each other. But there's always, the secret sauce aspect, and everybody wants to, put their own things on top of there. I guess how interactive is the community out there in terms behind the big data movement right now?
I would say in general, it's actually quite good and they play well together. Now, at the end of the day, they're all businesses, right?
Yeah.
They're always trying to, push, we'll say the community or push vendors or push customers in a certain way I wouldn't say they explicitly try to lock you into their, the world, but they would like to have you predisposed to their implementation so that you would be less inclined to think about jumping ship, etc. But I think also you talk to the vendors the companies are disputing some stacks over. They're also trying to add value on top of it. Yeah. So I think they understand that really it's what they do on top of the basic Apache Hadoop is what's going to, I think, create the stickiness between them and their customers going forward. So I think, I would say in large, I think the industry is in good shape, right? A lot of people are contributing. You see innovation coming from people like Cloudera, you see it coming from LinkedIn, you see it coming from all these different vendors, right? And I think in general, they've all got the right approach to making this a success. Because I think at the end of the day, right, if we can all grow this really big pie of big data type applications, we will all benefit from it. And I think they all see that at the moment.
Yeah, and it always seems like too, like whenever you get like the engineers or the coders or the software people involved, they all seem to be very collaborative. Whenever I go to a show or something like that, those guys are always, hey, they want to work with everybody. They just want to make this work. It's always when you get down the line a little bit to the sales or the legal department, that's where it always gets a little trickier. But at least it always seems like the software guys are always on board.
It's true. I mean, being in engineering, right? Our job every day is to try and solve problems and get things to work, right? We tend to think less about the commercial aspect. The marketing folks, that's their job, right? That's what they get paid the big bucks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. It makes sense. And I guess now, I mean, do you guys work directly with carriers, or do you work through vendor partners as well, or is it kind of a mix depending upon the situation?
Yeah, it's certainly a mix, right? So, so for some of them, say our strategic customers, we go direct. Okay. Because we want to be close to them. We want to basically be in there with them every day, working through the issues and making sure nothing gets lost in the translation through channels, etc. But I would say for the most part, we work through channels. So we have channel partners throughout the world. We have folks in LATAM, folks in Africa, folks in Europe, etc., in Asia. And we work with them with their local presence and, again, their local knowledge of what's important on the ground and the relationships that they've built. And we work through them basically to get our solution installed and deployed within carriers, networks, and those types of the world. So, as I said, for the strategics, we'll go direct. But for the most of our business, we'll do it through channels.
Yeah, and obviously having kind of that worldwide presence, that brings a lot of challenges as well, because I mean, different countries have different regulatory issues and different views on what fraud is and what isn't. I mean, I'm guessing that alone, having that kind of big presence makes probably a little more of a challenge for you guys. I'm sure it's a good challenge, but something that's kind of more to work on there.
Yeah, no, it does create a challenge. I mean, for example, we offer two different models. We can do on-prem deployment for folks if they wanted to, if they're very sensitive to having all the data reside within their network, etc. And then other carriers have got comfortable with having it in the cloud. Mm-hmm. So we also have the ability to deploy it through a cloud vendor like an Amazon or Google, etc. So we do that today. But it really does depend on the customer and the regulatory requirements. So we could go to places in Africa or in LATAM, and it's very much the data has to reside within our borders. They're very resistant or reluctant to let that data come outside the borders. And in that case, you either do an on-prem solution or you find a partner who they're comfortable with deploying it in the cloud within the country. That does add challenges, right? I mean, it adds challenges from the point of view of deployment models, support models, etc. And we've been really religious around trying to have one code base, one product going to the marketplace. And we work hard here to make sure that what we deploy in one solution, be it on-prem or MVNO, the same capabilities are available in parallel in the other. And it does take a little bit more engineering, but I think it's worth it from the point of view of support and maintenance down the line, and also from a customer perspective, right? I think they all see the features we're developing at the same time quicker, as opposed to, hey, because my customer on-prem has demanded it now, I got to do it there first, and then I get to the cloud-based solution later. We want to avoid that. We're rolling it all out to all our different deployment models simultaneously.
Makes sense. I know too, one thing in the telecom world, and something we cover a lot on the show here, is kind of the movement, especially in the mobile space and the general telecom space, towards virtualized platforms. A lot of companies using a lot more software, cloud in their operations. I guess is that making it? It seems like it would make it easier for what you guys are trying to do. I mean, obviously, being able to get into the network there and tap into different areas using software is probably a lot easier than the old school models would be in doing this. I'm guessing that's been a positive for you guys to be able to kind of work in these virtualized environments, I guess.
Absolutely. I think it's huge for us, right? Because it's funny. We talk a lot to our customers about the application and all the technology that underwrites the machine learning, the big data, etc. But at the end of the day, that's all predicated on getting access to data. And what I see with the movement to network virtualization, software-defined networks, what that's going to do, amongst all the other great things it will do for the making service available to customers, is I think it will enable carriers to provide data to upstream applications a lot easier. Example, just from the point of view of tapping and logs and monitoring, that I think is going to really be a lot easier to get access to data coming from the different services that carriers are deploying. So I think for us, that's going to be huge, because it is a challenge today. You've got to go out to the business, figure out what systems have the data that you're trying to get access to, and work with them to bring it back. And it's always, in a proprietary format as to that vendor, how they developed it and how they make the data available. So I think with SDN and NFV, it's going to actually help get us that data a lot quicker and a lot easier for the carriers. Not as if the carriers don't want to make it available. It's just the internal processes and the hoops they got to go through are hard today. So I think a lot of that friction, I think, will go away with the advent of this new technology.
Yeah, and again, too, like you said, I mean, the market out there in terms of the fraud, that's, the big numbers from fraud. I mean, it seems like, any sort of savings that or carriers can cut down on that aspect of it. That seems to probably help the ROI model for them. I mean, again, if they can cut down, 1 or 2% of fraud, I mean, that right there would probably pay for the whole deployment of what they need. So just being able to have that model there, I'm sure makes it easier to kind of, I guess, grease the wheels in terms of getting this stuff across.
It does, absolutely, and I mean, because the other aspect of that too, right? So, I mean, the carrier market today, it's not growing like it was 10 years ago. So, it was a fantastic growth market 10 years ago. And fraud, while it was there, was less of an issue, because if you're growing hand over fist, you're more worried about your growth as opposed to the bottom line.
Yeah.
Now with the market a little bit more mature, growth that harder to find, anywhere that you can go look and you can improve your margins. And fraud is an area where carriers can improve their margins. They're willing to invest in that now, because as you say, if you can detect fraud and take a 0.5% or 1% of fraud up, that goes straight to your bottom line. So it's a far easier sell, we'll say, than it might have been 5-10 years ago when the focus was elsewhere. So from our perspective, the ability to help carriers detect the fraud, and it's not just by the way, we'll say a revenue thing for them, but it's also a customer.
Sure. Yeah.
Because if you cut down fraud and how it impacts the customers, it also makes for less churn across the business. Yeah,
I guess, kind of looking at the industry from the inside, it's, we always look at the financial part of it, but you're right. I guess from customers facing part of it, that's the more important part, obviously, because again, keeping customers and reducing churn and just making sure they're happy and spending more money in turn is always a big positive as well for everybody.
That's right. I think one of the other interesting things, when we go talk to customers today, they'll talk about, hey, I've just invested in big data, I've deployed the service, deployed the software, but now I'm looking for something that can give me an ROI on it. And we explain to them, hey, fraud is one of the first applications that it's so easy for you to go to your CFO and say, if we invest in this, and if we can deliver on, reducing fraud by 25% or 50% in our company, there is actually an immediate ROI. And the other thing that we're working with people say, and what you're doing with fraud is when you deploy a fraud solution, you're bringing in data sets around network usage, customer data, and other parts of your network. What you're actually doing is you start to create a data lake. And while fraud might be your first application and the one with a real ROI, what you're actually doing is creating a data set that you can start to leverage in other parts of the business. It could be in Customer 360, it could be in security, it could be in our other aspects of the business. So what you're doing is you're building a foundation, not just for be able to tackle fraud, but I think also to leverage and support other aspects of the business going forward. So from that respect, it's a good entry for carriers into the space, and one that they can actually justify very well, even in financially tighter circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you can build that layer of comfort or familiarity with the platforms themselves, like you said, I mean, fraud is an easy, not necessarily easy, but it's a good first step, and then you can always just build on that and start doing more and more. And once you get that ball rolling, everybody internally there knows more and more about it, and people get more familiar with it. That just makes it so much easier going forward.
Yeah, evangelizing at the start is always the hardest part. Once you get people converted, then it gets easier.
Very good. Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess maybe a final question for you guys. I guess as you look, over the next 6 to 12 months or so, I guess for you guys internally there, what's, maybe a big challenge that you see out in the market, or what's kind of, what's the one thing keeping you up late at night or working long on weekends that's kind of really pushing you guys forward?
Yeah, I think for us, the interesting challenges going forward is that one is fraud, I think, is morphing from, most fraud historically has been focused on voice services in the carrier space.
Yep.
I think if I look to where the future of fraud will be on the data plane.
Yeah.
People are going to figure out how to leverage the data services for fraud going forward. And in order to be able to detect that, then we've created a DPI facility within our product. So we have the ability to ingest network packets in real time. And we're starting to look at how we can leverage that so we can help carriers detect fraud in the data plane ahead of time. And it's a great example, really, of we see it coming, we see it popping up in certain parts of the world, but it's one of those areas that it's not as well defined or known or understood as fraud in the voice space. So that's, again, where I think we believe that bringing machine learning, which has the ability to kind of detect the unknown unknowns, want to look at anomalous type behavior across your network, be that in voice or data services. We think that's where our focus is, and that's where we're spending most of our energy at the moment, trying to get ahead of that, because I think that's where the big challenges will be for telco operators going forward, is basically as people look to figure out how they can leverage the data plane for fraudulent type of activities.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because you're right. It does seem like, again, with all that data coming in, so much data that, yeah, I mean, you can't just have one person there checking all these streams of data coming in. I mean, you need a machine or you need automation there that can really parse through, millions of bits of data per second, per hour, whatever it's going to be, to really kind of see what's, see trends or see something that's happening out there that a person just can't find.
Yeah, absolutely. Without the automation of that, they get bogged down. And we've seen that, right? We've gone into customers where they had systems where people were reviewing alerts. And what was happening was they were falling behind by days and weeks on the alerts because it's just so hard to keep up with the volume of data. So by actually automating and bringing machine learning and doing kind of anomalous detection, you can actually short circuit that time from event to actually analysis. And basically the machine is doing the heavy lifting. So what you can do then is have your analysts look at the output of that, and I say it's a higher level type of an analysis that they can apply to it and actually detect the fraud quicker and react to it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Definitely, volumes are just growing exponentially every day, and you've got to bring machines and CPU to bear on it.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to get a lot of data, but if you can't do anything with that data, it's just useless data. So yeah, you got to be able to parse through it and see what's actually happening there, or there's no point in doing it. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, hey, Perk, definitely appreciate the great insight on this. Obviously, it is a market that is expanding rapidly, and again, as the telecom market and the mobile space moves more and more towards data is a bigger part of everything now. Even voice now is a data traffic. So it's all data nowadays. No more of just voice anymore. So as that kind of evolves, obviously, it's good to get some good insight from you guys on the topic. So thanks so much for the time today. Definitely appreciate it. Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to speak with Faction on advantages of multi-cloud environments for telecom operators and enterprises.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.